Dahil gabi na nga, kaya namabalik mo ka ako.
Tulong na ganyan naman ako.
Nanunod na. Pasimple o
Kasi alam mo ba kasi ang importante mo, Ronnie, yung aso lang naman sila. Kung papahuli pa lang sila, malaki na sila, okay lang.
Para malaman kung nasaan na ako.
Kasi,
Bilhin na kasi. At
yung
mabilis
ano,
namin
gusto ko
takbo
naman
ng
nila,
sasakyan. Ganoon pa rin ang itsura ng mukha niya. Iniitim pa rin ang palibot ng mata.
nasa akin ba yan?
Pinagtataka ko pa paano siya nakalago nakita sa
Well, it's Wednesday morning.
at hindi ko
Workers are here,
nakita na lumipat.
and the boss is giving instructions, as you can see.
Nalaman na hindi mo pa mismo akong nakita na kagaya niya sa daan dahil gabi na. Isa pa, usan ang mga pasahero palapit sa may pintuan ng jeep. Hanggang sa ako nalakasan ko ang loob ko at nang kumari na hindi siya nakikita.
I'm just going to talk about health, really, and health in the field. It keeps on coming up, and of course, it keeps on coming up because as us vloggers get ill, we talk about it. So it's when we start comparing our situations here with situations we're more familiar with back home. So that's what tends to happen. So I've been listening to vloggers I know and how they're dealing with current scenarios at the moment, and it's inevitable as we get older. We do get more things happen to us. I mean, you know, it does happen. But I want to make the point that we've got to understand the type of world we're in the Philippines. And there are many, you know, the Philippines isn't unique or unusual. Most of the world is like this, actually. I mean, if I think of my life in Africa, and I think of my life in other parts of Asia, and I think of my life, actually, even, yes, in the NHS, when I was in the UK with the NHS, I would say, you know, I've experienced things with my own parents that weren't very good, and that was in the UK with doctors and medical support. So I would say you must understand you're going to have these things happen in your life sometimes, these little mini traumas that are going to affect you until you're no longer there, of course. When you go, you're gone altogether. So that's what happens. That's what happens to all of us, whether we're here or whether we're in our home countries. That's what happens. I think the important thing is not to become totally over anxious with it. You know, be aware of your own body and be aware of things that are wrong all the time. You know, if you go for a regular medical here and have blood tests, and you can get a good medical in this country, and you can have all your blood tests done here, and it's fine, and you can go and have a discussion with a doctor if you wish, or you can just read the blood tests yourself and come to your own conclusions. Because I've had so many medicals year after year after year when I was in other countries, and I can see them. I see them on my phone. The NHS is a fantastic app now. So when you go and have your test done in the NHS these days, you don't get, you might want to go and see the doctor if there's something that's not quite right, but you don't actually have to get the feedback now from the doctor. Because the medical results go straight onto the app, which you have access to, so you can pick up the information yourself. You know, and it gives you sufficient information to tell you that you need to either go and see the doctor or don't worry about it. But that's not my point. My point I want to make is that, and I had this view when I was a young man in South Africa, when I was tearing between Cape Town and Johannesburg, flat out in my car, um, doing a long straight roads with no other traffic on them, and then thinking, if anything happened to me here, if I came off the road here, chances are my survival rate would be nilch. And that's what would happen in South Africa. Lots of young, healthy people lost their lives. They bled to death by being in road accidents, but weren't found until it was too late, basically. And that's the difference between here, that's the main difference between here and, say, somewhere like the UK, where I'm from. If you have an accident on the M25 or on the M1 or M6, or if you have a stroke at home or a cardiovascular problem of some kind, of heart attack, within minutes, you're going to have paramedics coming through the door and resuscitating you and stabilizing you. Before they even move you, they're going to be doing that. And that's the big difference between here and let's call it a first world environment like we have in the UK. That is the major difference. That is the big difference. It's the emergency services that actually make the difference, not private medical against the NHS or anything like that, because actually the doctors who work in the NHS also work, they do both. And the hospitals, it's the same hospitals in many cases. So whether you go private or whether you go, whether you use the NHS, you're usually using the same doctors in the same facilities. The only thing you're getting with being private is you get bounced further up the queue, so you get looked at, straight away, even if you've got a minor ailment, shall we say. So that's the difference. Of course, in the emergency units, the accident and emergency A&E, you're being you're being assessed, really, before you get to the hospital. If the ambulances bring you in, they've already done an assessment, and so they're waiting for you. They're ready for you when you get into that trauma unit. So you already had the assessment from the paramedics in the ambulance. So that's the big difference, as I see it. That is the significant difference. If you have a trauma here, it's the time it takes for you to get to a specialist skill. That's the key. And you aren't in a position to make that decision because you may not be conscious. So that is the biggest problem, as I can see it, in this environment. There aren't paramedics roaming around. There might be in Manila and Cebu, I guess, but I don't think there are that many running around here in my neck of the woods and many rural communities. So you're taking your chances on that front, as you would be in many countries of the world. Now, that's why you've got to stay safe. That's why you've got to be careful, not have accidents. I always say, don't fall off the back of a scooter. I say it in a glib way. I don't mean just fall off the back of it. I mean, don't stand under a coconut tree, or don't fall off a ladder when you're trying to fix your roof, or when you're looking at your guttering. I was on a ladder the other day, actually, with my welly boots on. The worst thing, when I was going up the ladder, I'm wearing welly boots, and it was wet. It had been raining, so my welly boots were wet, the ladder was wet, and I wanted to look at the leaves that were in the gutter. So I thought to myself, halfway up the ladder, I thought, actually, this isn't a good idea. So I came back down the ladder again. It's that sort of stuff. So I think so it's not about will doctors make good decisions or bad decisions compared with the UK. I think the doctors will make the same decisions no matter where you are, once they've assessed you, once they can clearly see what the problems are. But it's that emergency element that I think is the most critical here. The emergency services are not well enough spread throughout the Philippines to deal with every single emergency. That's the biggest problem. So that's what you've got to be aware of. I mean, of course, if you have an ailment, you have some tests and you have you have some kind of issue that needs medical treatment of some kind. You can make a decision. You can then make a decision: do I go back to my home country and have this done, or do I have it done here? Depending on which home country you're from. If you're from UK, obviously you're in the NHS and you can have it done there, and it's not going to cost a great deal. Well, it won't cost anything. If you're British, you'll just go in and have that done. If you're, in other countries, USA, you have to pay, and that, depending on who your insurance is, you may prefer to have it done here, which everyone tells me it is cheaper here than it is back in the USA. So it all depends on your country. You've got to give the UK and European countries, French, their medical services are very good, very good. And although we complain about the NHS, we know the NHS is overstretched. It's overstretched because too many of us don't take enough responsibility for our own health. So when A&E is at its worst, when it's busiest, it's on a Friday night and a Saturday night. They're always alcohol related usually. So it's car accidents, it's people that get into fights, it's people that overindulge and collapse. There's all these kind of things that go wrong, and it tends to be very much how we live our lives. So if we took more responsibility, we would be able to put a lot less strain on our NHS in the UK, in my opinion. That's my opinion, but what I see of it, that's what it is. What I want to do, the message I want to get across to people is people considering the Philippines and think, gosh, is it safe? Should we be considering the Philippines? Absolutely. And I tell you why. Providing it's the lifestyle you're looking for. But if you're living in rural Philippines, if you're living in the province and you're waking up to the sunshine and the crow of the roosters and the beautiful air and the insect noises at night and the slow pace of life and the fantastic food and the people, the smiling faces, it is going to be a wonderful therapy for your health. And that's what it can put years on your life, not take years away from your life. Okay, if you can get that balance right. But you have to take some responsibility for your own health. Okay, you can't live life saying, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if I have a stroke? What if I have a heart attack? What if a coconut falls on my head? What if I fall off the back of a scooter? What if I fall down a hole and nobody knows where I am? It's what ifs. You can't live life like that. But if you come here and enjoy life the way I'm talking, the way I'm describing it, it will be a great therapy for enjoyment and will improve the quality of life for you. And that's what's important. Take care.
Nangungundang na. Pasilyo.
Hindi, alam mo ba kung ano importante